Hello everyone! I am Emma, your English teacher, and welcome to Voice Vocabulary. If you want to improve your English, build your confidence, and learn naturally through interesting stories, then you are in the right place. On this channel, we learn English in a simple and engaging way, not through boring grammar rules, but through powerful stories, real-life situations, and meaningful conversations that help you understand the language naturally. Because learning a language is not only about memorizing words and sentences. It is about expressing your thoughts clearly, sharing your ideas with confidence, and connecting with people from different parts of the world. So if you truly want to speak English with confidence, make sure you subscribe to Voice Vocabulary and become part of our growing community of learners who are improving their English step by step every single day. Now, take a deep breath, relax, and get ready for today's story. Today's story is about something very important. Something that almost every English learner experiences at some point in their journey. Fear, yes, the fear of speaking English. The fear of making mistakes, the fear of being judged, and the fear of not sounding perfect when you try to speak. But what if I told you that this fear can actually become your greatest strength? What if one small change in the way you learn English could completely transform your confidence and the way you speak? Today, I am going to tell you a powerful story. A story about a student who started from zero. At the beginning, he could barely speak a single sentence in English. Speaking even a few simple words felt difficult and uncomfortable for him. But slowly, step by step, he changed his learning habits. He changed the way he practiced, and most importantly, he changed the way he believed in himself. And because of that change, his life started to transform in ways he had never imagined before. So stay with me until the end of this story. Because what you are about to hear might inspire you, motivate you, and help you start your own English speaking journey with confidence. A few years ago, in a small and busy city, there lived a boy named Arjun. Arjun was an ordinary student. He was not the smartest in his class, and he was not the most confident either. But there was one thing about Arjun that people noticed immediately. He was very quiet. In school, while other students talked, laughed, and answered questions, Arjun usually stayed silent. He preferred to sit in the back of the classroom and observe everything quietly. But the reason for his silence was not laziness. And it was not a lack of intelligence. The real reason was fear. Arjun was afraid of speaking English. Every day at school, there was an English class. The teacher would enter the classroom with a smile and greet the students. "Good morning, everyone," and the whole class would reply together. "Good morning, teacher." Arjun also spoke those words, but very softly. So softly that sometimes even he could barely hear his own voice. At first, he believed that learning English was easy. He thought that if he studied a few grammar rules and memorized some vocabulary words, he would automatically become fluent, but reality was very different. One day, the English teacher asked the class a simple question: "What did you do yesterday?" Many students quickly raised their hands. Some students said they played football. Some said they watched television. Others talked about their homework or their evening activities. Arjun also knew the answer. He wanted to say, "Yesterday I helped my father at his shop." The sentence was clear in his mind. But when the teacher looked in his direction and asked, "Arjun, would you like to answer?" something strange happened. His mind suddenly became empty. His heart started beating faster. His hands felt cold. And the simple sentence that he knew just a few seconds ago completely disappeared. The whole class became quiet. Everyone was looking at him. The teacher waited patiently. But Arjun could not say a single word. Finally, after a few seconds of silence, the teacher smiled and said, "That's okay, Arjun. Maybe next time." The class continued. But inside Arjun's mind, something had already changed. He felt embarrassed. he felt weak, and a dangerous thought started growing in his mind. Maybe I am not good at English. From that day on, Arjun tried to avoid speaking English whenever possible. If the teacher asked a question, he looked down at his notebook. If someone asked him to read aloud, he hoped the teacher would choose another student. Slowly, his silence became a habit. Weeks passed, months passed. Arjun continued attending English classes. He continued studying grammar. He continued memorizing new words. But there was one thing he never practiced: speaking. Because every time he thought about speaking English, the same fear returned. What if I make a mistake? What if my classmates laugh at me? What if my pronunciation sounds strange? These thoughts became a wall inside his mind. And that wall kept growing stronger every day. But Arjun did not know something important. He did not know that thousands, even millions, of English learners around the world were experiencing the exact same problem. They could understand English. They could read English. They could even write English. But when it was time to speak, fear stopped them. And Arjun believed he was the only one struggling. But life has a strange way of teaching us important lessons. Sometimes the biggest changes begin with the smallest moments. And very soon, Arjun was about to experience a moment that would completely change his journey with English. A moment that would show him a new way to learn. A way that was simple, powerful, and life-changing. But at that time, Arjun had no idea what was coming next. And that moment was closer than he thought. A few days after that embarrassing moment in class, Arjun began to notice something interesting during lunch break. Many students were talking to each other in English. Not perfect English, not complicated sentences. Just simple words, simple conversations. But they were speaking without fear. Arjun watched them carefully from a distance. One student said, "I watched a movie yesterday." Another replied, "Really? Which movie?" Someone else laughed and said, "It was probably another action movie." Their sentences were not perfect. Sometimes they made grammar mistakes. Sometimes their pronunciation was not clear. But something about them was different. They were not afraid. For the first time, Arjun started wondering about something. Maybe speaking English was not about being perfect. Maybe it was about being brave. That evening, when Arjun returned home, he opened his English notebook. He looked at the pages filled with grammar rules and vocabulary lists. Past tense, future tense, conditional sentences. Dozens of complicated rules. He had spent months memorizing these rules. But even after learning so much grammar, he still could not speak confidently. Something was wrong, very wrong. Suddenly, he remembered something his teacher once said. Language is learned through practice, not only through theory. At that moment, a small idea appeared in Arjun's mind. What if he started practicing speaking, even if he made mistakes? At first, the idea felt uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. Because speaking English alone in his room felt strange, but curiosity was stronger than fear. So that night, Arjun tried something new. He stood in front of the mirror in his room. He looked at himself and slowly said a simple sentence. "Hello, my name is Arjun." His voice sounded awkward. His pronunciation was not perfect, but something surprising happened. Nothing bad happened. Nobody laughed. Nobody criticized him. The room was completely silent. And for the first time, Arjun felt a tiny spark of confidence. The next day, he tried again. This time he said another sentence. "Today was a good day." Then another. "I studied English in school." Then another. "I want to speak English fluently." At first, his sentences were slow, very slow. Sometimes he stopped in the middle because he forgot the next word. Sometimes he made grammar mistakes. But day by day, something started changing. His fear slowly began to disappear because every time he practiced speaking, he realized something important. Mistakes were not dangerous. Mistakes were normal. Mistakes were part of learning. After 1 week, Arjun noticed another improvement. Speaking English no longer felt impossible. It still felt difficult, but not impossible. So he decided to take the next step. Instead of speaking only in front of the mirror, he started describing his daily activities in English. When he woke up, he said, "I am waking up." When he brushed his teeth, he said, "I am brushing my teeth." When he ate breakfast, he said, "I am eating breakfast." These sentences were simple. Very simple, but they were powerful because for the first time in his life, Arjun was using English in real life, not only inside a notebook, but inside his daily routine. And slowly, something amazing began to happen. English stopped feeling like a school subject. It started feeling like a language he could actually use. But Arjun still had a long journey ahead of him, because practicing alone in his room was only the beginning. Very soon, he would face a much bigger challenge, speaking English in front of other people, and that challenge would test his courage in ways he never expected. After practicing English alone for several days, Arjun started feeling a little more comfortable. Speaking in front of the mirror was no longer strange for him. In fact, it had become part of his daily routine. Every evening, he stood in front of the mirror and spoke a few simple sentences. Sometimes he talked about his day, sometimes he described things around him, and sometimes he simply tried to express his thoughts. But deep inside, Arjun knew something important. Practicing alone was helpful, but it was not enough. If he truly wanted to become confident in English, he would eventually need to speak with other people. And that idea still scared him. One evening, while watching a video about language learning, Arjun heard something that caught his attention. The speaker said something very simple. If you want to improve your speaking, challenge yourself to speak English every day for 30 days. 30 days, not forever, not 1 year, just 30 days. The idea sounded interesting. It also sounded a little frightening, but Arjun decided to try it. He called it his 30-day English challenge. The rules were simple. Every day, he had to speak English for at least 10 minutes. It did not matter if he made mistakes. It did not matter if his sentences were simple. The only rule was he had to speak. Day 1 was difficult, very difficult. Arjun tried to describe his morning routine in English, but he kept forgetting words. Sometimes he stopped in the middle of a sentence. Sometimes he repeated the same word again and again. Still, he did not stop. 10 minutes later, he finished his practice. It was not perfect, but it was progress. Day 2 was slightly easier. Arjun spoke about his school. He described his classroom. He described his teachers. And he described his friends. His sentences were still simple, but they were becoming smoother. Day 3. Something interesting happened. Arjun started thinking in English. Not complete sentences, just small phrases. But it was the first time his mind naturally tried to use English words. This small change made him very excited. For the first time, learning English started feeling natural. Days continued to pass. Day 5, Day 7, Day 10, every day. Arjun kept speaking. Some days were good. Some days were frustrating. But he never stopped the challenge. Slowly, something powerful started happening. His brain began recognizing patterns in English. He started remembering common phrases. Simple sentences began forming naturally in his mind. And most importantly, his fear slowly began to fade. One afternoon at school, the English teacher asked the class another question. "What did you do last weekend this time?" Arjun felt something different. The same nervous feeling appeared. But it was weaker, much weaker, for a moment. He thought about raising his hand, then fear returned, and he stopped. But even though he did not speak that day, something had already changed. For the first time, Arjun believed that maybe, just maybe, he could do it. The 30-day English challenge continued. Day 15 arrived. By this time, Arjun could speak for 10 minutes without stopping. His sentences were still simple, but they were clearer, more natural, and more confident. Then day 20 arrived. This was the moment when everything started changing, because on that day, Arjun decided to try something he had never done before. He decided to speak English with another person. Day 20 of Arjun's 30-day English challenge arrived quietly. By this time, speaking English alone had become normal for him. Every day he practiced, every day he tried to improve. But there was still one big step left, speaking with another person. And that step still felt frightening, very frightening. One afternoon, after school ended, Arjun was walking home with his friend Rahul. Rahul was a friendly and energetic student. He loved talking, he loved sharing stories. And most importantly, he was not afraid of speaking English. While they were walking, Rahul suddenly started speaking in English. Today's math test was really difficult. Arjun understood the sentence immediately. He knew the meaning, but as usual, he stayed silent. Rahul continued speaking. I think I made two mistakes in the last question. Arjun nodded his head, but inside his mind, something was happening. For 20 days, he had been practicing English every single day. He had spoken hundreds of sentences in front of the mirror. He had described his daily life. He had completed half of his challenge. And suddenly, a thought appeared in his mind. If not now, then when? His heart started beating faster. His palms felt slightly warm. But this time, he decided not to stay silent. He took a deep breath and said slowly, yes. The test was difficult. The sentence was simple, very simple. But it was the first time Arjun had spoken English in a real conversation. Rahul looked at him, slightly surprised. But then he smiled, yes. Especially the last question, for a moment. Arjun felt something unexpected, relief. Nothing bad happened. Nobody laughed. Nobody criticized him. The conversation continued naturally. Rahul asked another question. Did you study for the test yesterday? Arjun paused for a moment. He thought carefully about his words. Then he replied, yes, I studied for 2 hours. His pronunciation was not perfect. His grammar might not have been perfect either. But he had spoken, and that small moment changed everything. They continued walking and talking. Their conversation was simple, short sentences, easy words. But every sentence made Arjun feel stronger, more confident, more relaxed. When Arjun reached home that evening, he could not stop smiling for the first time in his life. He had spoken English in a real conversation. And it was not as scary as he had imagined. In fact, it felt exciting that night. When he stood in front of the mirror for his daily practice, he noticed something different. His voice sounded stronger. His sentences came faster. And the fear that once controlled him was slowly disappearing. Day 21 arrived, then day 22. Arjun continued his challenge. Now, he tried to speak English with Rahul whenever possible. Sometimes the conversations were short. Sometimes they lasted only a few minutes. But every conversation helped him improve. Every conversation built his confidence slowly. Arjun started realizing an important truth. Fluency does not come from perfection. Fluency comes from practice, from courage, from speaking, even when you are afraid. And by the time day 30 was approaching, Arjun was no longer the silent student he once was. But the most important moment of his journey was still waiting, because very soon he would face the same situation that once embarrassed him in class. But this time, everything would be different. Day 30 of Arjun's 30-day English challenge finally arrived. 30 days earlier, Arjun was afraid to speak even a single sentence in English. 30 days earlier, the idea of speaking in front of others felt impossible. But now, something inside him had changed. His fear was smaller. His confidence was stronger, and most importantly, he had proved something to himself. Practice works. That morning, Arjun walked into his classroom like any other day. The students were talking, some were laughing. Some were finishing their homework quickly before the class started. A few minutes later, the English teacher entered the room. "Good morning, everyone," the class replied together. "Good morning, teacher." The lesson began. After explaining the topic for a few minutes, the teacher asked a question. "What did you do yesterday evening?" Several students raised their hands immediately. Arjun looked at them, then he looked down at his notebook. For a moment, the old fear tried to return. The same fear that once stopped him from speaking. But this time, something was different. He remembered the mirror practice. He remembered the conversations with Rahul. He remembered the 30-day English challenge. And suddenly, Arjun realized something important. He was not the same person anymore. Slowly, he raised his hand. The teacher noticed him. A small smile appeared on her face. Yes, Arjun, the classroom became quiet. All eyes turned toward him, but this time, Arjun did not panic. He took a calm breath and said, "Yesterday evening, I studied English for 1 hour. Then I helped my father at his shop." His voice was clear. His sentence was simple. But it was confident. The teacher smiled proudly. "Very good, Arjun." Some of his classmates nodded with respect, and in that small moment, Arjun felt something powerful, pride. Not because his English was perfect, but because he had finally overcome his fear that day. Arjun learned the most important lesson of his journey. Fluency does not come from memorizing thousands of grammar rules. Fluency does not come from waiting for the perfect moment. Fluency comes from speaking, practicing, and making mistakes without fear. From that day forward, Arjun continued improving his English. He read more stories. He watched more English videos. He spoke with his friends whenever he could, and step by step, his confidence continued growing. Years later, Arjun would look back at that 30-day challenge and realize something amazing. That small decision changed his entire life, and now, let me ask you something. Are you like Arjun? Do you understand English, but feel afraid to speak? Do you worry about making mistakes? Do you sometimes feel that your English is not good enough? If your answer is yes, remember this. Every confident English speaker once started as a beginner. Every fluent speaker once made hundreds of mistakes. The only difference between those who succeed and those who stay silent is practice. So starting today, challenge yourself. Speak English for a few minutes every day. Talk to yourself. Describe your day. Share your thoughts. Make mistakes, and learn from them, because confidence is not something you are born with. Confidence is something you build, one sentence at a time. And who knows, maybe one day, your story will inspire someone else. Just like Arjun's story inspired you today. Thank you for listening. And if you want to improve your English through powerful and inspiring stories like this, make sure you subscribe to Voice Vocabulary. Because here, we learn English step by step, story by story, and day by day. Until next time, keep learning, keep practicing, and keep believing in yourself.